Hello and welcome back to Simple Times Studios, where we embark on epic adventures through the power of solo roleplay games and tabletop RPGs. For this episode, we have a bit of an experimental piece in more ways than one. Originally, this was written back in August of last year for an art and writing site I really need to move on from. It was written to show that I was still alive and showing the format of most episodes on my channel. It was also written to celebrate a site holiday called Fat Bunny Week. What that holiday is about should be self-explanatory. Anyway, moving on. Our game this episode is titled Stay Frosty, specifically the 2025 Remaster recently released. An independently developed tabletop RPG about space marines fighting in a brutal galaxy full of demons, space bugs, super predators, and many other threats. It is light on rules and designed with the old school revival mindset, so it should have some compatibility with other OSR sci-fi games, but I haven't tested that out yet. Stay Frosty uses a full set of polyhedral dice, but the core mechanic is simple. You have 4 largely self-explanatory stats: brains, brawn, dexterity, and willpower. To perform a task, you must roll a 20-sided die and get equal or over your relative attribute. When in a contested action like combat, your opponent must roll below your stat to beat you. This is so unlike how many games, especially many games from the early 2000s onward, handled it that the designers felt it important to repeat several times, including once in italics, that low stats are good in this game. While I was as confused as many at first, I ultimately came to like it. I am notoriously bad at rolling high in tabletop RPGs, especially when the 3d6 method of stat generation is used. How bad am I? Well, when using the Shadow Dark and Dark Space Quick Start rules to roll up characters for a future episode using Dark Space, I rolled up 3 stat blocks where I could not get higher than a 14 for the life of me, muttered a few choice words about how the OSR camp are a bunch of Massonists that really should see a therapist, then rolled up 3 characters using the 4d6 drop the lowest rule I used to use in 3.5 D&D. By comparison, I rolled up 2 Stay Frosty characters so far. Base, who will be described below shortly, and a sharpshooting battle hacker with the nickname Pretty Boy that we might meet in a future episode. And in both cases, I had to double check the MOS chart because I just barely missed the all stats are a 10 or below requirements for the Special Forces MOS for both characters. So to go through character creation, let's introduce our protagonists for this adventure. We're back in the Orion Commonwealth setting, first formally introduced back in Lieutenant Watson in Protein Problems. Only this time we're focusing on the living space plushies of the Orion Commonwealth. Specifically Sergeant Base of the Orion Commonwealth's Pacifier Corps. Normally, the Commonwealth relies on the Tech Guard for their defense, militarized robot operators that fight remotely with squads of remote-controlled drones. However, urban combat and shipboarding actions require a more personal touch, hence the assault troopers of the Pacifiers. Base is, unsurprisingly, a girthy, brown-furred, rabbit-like anthropomorph. Built more for hugging foes to death than punching them, he's still reasonably tough and a decent shot with his SR9 stun rifle. First, we'll roll his attributes. We'll roll 3d6 straight down the line, leading to an 11, a 7, an 8, and a 14 for brains, brawn, dexterity, and willpower respectively. Not a bad spread of difficulty targets to roll at or above. Willpower is weak, but since psionics don't really exist in the Orion Commonwealth setting, Willpower is only used for not freaking out when I hit a tension explodes situation. More on that when we come to it. Next, we pick his military occupational specialty, what he does in the Pacifier Corps. This is basically his character class. Ultimately, I select infantry as his brain stat isn't quite low enough for most of the support roles. Infantry gives him advantage to roll damage with personal weapons, allowing him to roll twice and take the higher amount. I then roll for his special weapon and get a flamethrower. Not a pacifier weapon, but he has had worked with humans before this adventure, so he might have gotten one from them. Next, I would normally roll Base's starting hit points. Characters in Stay Frosty normally do not start with maximum hit points at first level. However, I tend to ignore that rule when I play solo and just give my character max HP because I am playing only one Space Marine. I then roll for his rank and get Sergeant. A little higher than I picture him in my head, but it gets him an additional melee weapon and advantages in battles of will. Lastly, I record all his equipment and note how much he can carry without being over-encumbered. And that's it. That's Base, and he's all ready to go. We're going to roll up a few times on the mission generator and pick a few defining traits unique to the Orion Commonwealth setting that aren't on the normal mission generation tables. We end up with a search and rescue mission on an abandoned space station that is overrun by alien super predators. Base is there to find and rescue a missing Sol Federation team. And the complication is going to be this place is bigger than it looks. And now we begin. Base in Operation Big Game Hunt. Sergeant Base sat squished in the small one-person shuttle, reviewing his mission briefing as the shuttle docked with the abandoned orbital colony. The humans of the Sol Federation had built this massive McKendree cylinder nearly a century ago and lost contact with it during one of their interstellar wars. Situated on a shared border with the unexplored regions of space, the Sol Federation reluctantly agreed to a joint expedition with the Orion Commonwealth to reclaim the colony and launch further expeditions from the colony at a later date. Base was sent on ahead to meet with the human expedition since he had previous experience with the Sol Federation, and the other members of the Orion expedition would arrive later. As his vessel landed in the hangar, the well-rounded Lapine pacifier grabbed his gear and waddled out into the hangar with a sway of his thunderous hips. SR-9 stun rifle in hand and at rest, Base ambled into the empty hangar. Almost immediately his long ears began to twitch as he noticed the hangar was empty. The plump Space Marine bunny listening for signs of activity before getting on his communicator. "This is Sergeant Base to Sol Federation Expedition. Please respond," he called to the humans exploring the colony and got nothing but static. Sighing, he switched frequencies. "This is Bulwark 1 to Expedition Command. I've arrived on the colony. The human expedition is nowhere to be seen and not answering calls." Expedition Command replied, "Understood, Base. Probably nothing, so go on and find them. The other pacifiers and the rest of the Commonwealth expedition will be arriving once you establish contact with the Federation team," the communication officer replied. Base nodded. "Understood," he answered before signing off. Sighing, he shook his head. Something was not right about this. But he wasn't solving this mystery by standing around here. With a weighty step in his stride, he lumbered towards the double doors at the far end of the hangar. Still drawing power, the doors automatically creaked open with a groan that reinforced how long this place had gone without regular maintenance. Beyond the door was a small square room, roughly 20 feet to a side. 3 doors, including the one he just walked through. The other 2 were on opposite ends of the wall opposite of him. Otherwise, the room was empty of anything of note. a waiting area where travelers could have waited to be screened before being allowed deeper into the colony. The only noteworthy detail was that there were signs of some kind of an altercation here. Furniture was wrecked or flipped on its side, and there were a few claw marks in the sofas. Picking the unexplored door on his left, Base opened it to find a hallway running at least 30 feet ahead of him before the corridor disappeared into the inky blackness. The ceiling lights appeared to be motion sensitive. To his right was a series of transparent windows for a guard station that connected to the other door in the room behind him. Compared to the waiting area behind him, the guard station looked pristine through the window, like colony security had gone on break and would be back at any moment. Smiling ever so briefly as his thunderous thighs barely cleared the narrow doorway, Base ambled down the corridor. Motion-sensitive lights switched on as he moved on through before coming up to a station door. Gently pressing on the keypad next to the door, Base opened the door and looked inside. Inside was another room, small and rectangular, but slightly larger than the waiting room he left behind. There was only one other door on the opposite wall. Much like before, the room looked to be empty of anything of note. Yet something put Base on edge. Okay. Rolled a 1 on the Wandering Monster, so this will be our first encounter with the O-Beast. Going to roll a brain save to see if the critter gets a drop on Base. 13 beats Base's brains score, so he does detect a creature in time. Sticking one armored boot into the room, Base stopped as his long rabbit ears immediately perked up. Yeah, he heard that. Something hiding in the vents above the room ahead of him. He caught himself just in time for a large, dense blur of muscle, fat, and midnight black fur to drop down in front of him. Okay, and now for initiative. Base has to beat his dex, and does so with a 12. He goes ahead of the monster. Base blinked as he reflexively took a step back into the corridor behind him. The creature that tried to ambush him was a big, feline-shaped creature with 3 hungry, predatory eyes looking right at him. A large jaw with a double row of sharp teeth hung open as it looked at the pacifier ravenously. An O-Beast, one of the Forerunner's super omnivores. Okay, acting on trained instinct, Base raised his stun rifle and opened fire. Base is going to take a shot, which is a dex check. He beats his dex plus 8 with a 15, which hits, and does 4 points of damage, leaving the creature with 15 HP left. Base's shot hit the creature in the shoulder, stunning it slightly. The O-Beast roared and lunged at Base, claws extended. Rolling the O-Beast's attack. I have to get a 7 or less on Brawn to land a melee attack, because monsters roll under the PC's relevant stats to succeed, and a 10 does not succeed. The ravenous feline swung at the stout pacifier, but its hammy paws just bounced off Base's chest plate. Base fired again, trying to drive the creature back. Base rolls an 11 and hits again. Does a whopping 12 points of damage and leaves the creature with 3 HP. Maybe I should have given the O-Beast more hit dice. Base let out a war cry as he blasted the creature squarely in the chest with a 3-shot burst from his SR9. The O-Beast cried in pain and promptly jumped up and squeezed its bulbous mass into a vent that should have been more than a hair too small for it to fit through. It was gone for now. Okay, and now I roll the ammo die for a stun rifle, and I get a 5. I still have a D8's worth of ammo. Base checked the battery meter on his stun rifle. Still plenty of charge left. But an O-Beast. Well, that would certainly explain a few things. Okay. Can Base still contact the rest of the Orion expedition? I give it a 50-50, and 87 says no. Interesting. Still catching his breath, Base got onto his communicator. This is Bulwark 1 to Expedition Command. I just encountered an obese omnivore. Come in, Expedition Command. He called over his communicator. Nothing but static. Looks like he was on his own for now. Wonder what was causing all that interference. On a whim, he switched over to the Federation frequency to see if he could pick up someone now. Okay, is there anyone on the Sol Federation comms? Again, 50-50 and 49, so it's there, but it's faint. Sol Federation Expedition, this is Sergeant Base of the Orion Commonwealth. Please respond. He began again. For a second there was static again, then suddenly, Orion? Bzip. This is Corporal Bzip of the Bzip Troopers. We're Bzip in Bzip Residential Commons. A staticky female voice replied in a controlled panic before going silent. Base signed off and opened the door on the other wall. Definitely a lot to think about and not a lot of time to think about it. The door opened to a monorail platform, connecting the hangar complex with the rest of the colony. A monorail train sat idle at the platform, waiting for someone to activate it. Climbing aboard, he made his way to the front of the train and squeezed into the control booth. The Residential Commons station was the next stop on the route. Pushing a couple buttons, he coaxed the train to life and looked at the colony outside his window. Long ears open for signs of trouble, and seeing he had a bit of time before his destination, he checked his gear. Stun rifle was good, but he was going to switch for a Federation flamer he brought along. Flamer was also good on fuel. He adjusted a targeting reticle eyepiece he forgot to activate in his previous fight, and turned it on. Soon, the train's computer chimed with a warning that the residential station was arriving soon. Base sighed before ambling over to the control booth and making sure the train was slowing down as he approached the station. As the train came to a stop, he walked over to the passenger doors and raised his rifle. Back to work. The station for the Residential Commons bore the same signs of battle Base spotted in the hangars. All of it recent. Looks like the human expedition clashed with the O-Beast. Or were there more than one O-Beasts? A question he would have to ask the mysterious human corporal and her group. Assuming he could find her, the station he slowly walked through with his flamer rays was doing an excellent job, reinforcing just how big the district and the colony at large really was. Multiple platforms for separate trains running independently for everywhere, from the hangars he just came from all the way to some sort of industrial complex and some place labeled Star Bioresearch Campus. Each platform had a broad staircase and elevators leading up to a second-floor terminal that ran the entire length of the station and connected it to the imposing tower that was the Residential Commons, which in turn looked like another hub area that connected dozens of massive residential blocks to the rest of the colony. And above him, in a massive skylight, was a view of the entire urban landscape wrapped around the inside of the cylindrical colony. It was a lot to keep straight in his head, but fortunately he didn't need to think about it more than getting to humans and figuring out where to go from there. Long ears twitching at the slightest sound of trouble, Base ambled his way into the Residential Commons and hoped for the best. Entering the atrium, he spotted a trail of dead O-Beasts leading towards an elevator heading up to the main Commons building. Upon heading inside the cavernous elevator car, he found a single blood-stained glove print over the number 36. That looked like as good of a place to look as any. Ascending the elevator to the 36th floor, Base ambled out and into the elevator lobby. A small 10x10 room with murals depicting the Sol Federation's history upon going into space. A single door was at the other end. Continuing to putter along, the stout rabbit Pacifier found himself looking into a long, long hallway with flickering lights either way as far as the eye could see. Dozens of doors lined the hallway, each of them probably leading off to an abandoned apartment or office of some kind. There was no further sign of fighting, but that didn't mean anything given how ravenous O-beasts were. Okay, I'm going to roll the danger die as too much has been going on with nothing happening. I get a 3, environment. Stepping into the hallway, the lights flickering and then starting to go out one by one, starting down at the far end of the hallway and quickly picking up speed as the blackout crept closer and closer to base. The brown-furred Orion bunny immediately backed into the elevator lobby and pointed his flamer at the door. Outside of his field of view, someone swore and shouted, "Damn it, you tripped a breaker! Get the lights back on so we can see before that thing gets back here." A moment later, the lights all came back to life and lost their flicker. Base went back into the hallway and started slowly walking in the direction he heard the sound of shouting come from. Ambling along down a hallway that seemed to never end but definitely did, Base carefully followed the sound of the shouting human. Okay, does Base encounter the O-Beast again? I think it's very likely, and 32 means the Dice Oracle agrees with me. Another brains roll, and 16 is over my brain stat. Why can't I roll this good in group games? Alright. His long rabbit ears twitched as the pacifier started to pass an alcove where a pair of abandoned vending machines stood. A smile crossed his lips as he reflexively took a step back and forced the O-Beast to crash into a wall when it leapt out to pounce on Base. Base was quick to notice that this creature had wounds that the pacifier had inflicted previously. Okay, initiative again. 5 does not beat Base's dexterity, so the creature goes first. I suppose I couldn't be lucky all adventure. Okay, it's going to try and bite a chunk out of him and gets a 1. That's definitely under Base's brawn. 5 on the 1d10, so 3 damage after armor. Base has 7 HP left. As Base flicked on his flamer and brought it to life with an encouraging hiss, the O-Beast bit into the rabbit's ample flank and drew blood before pulling away. The rabbit pacifier yelped in pain and took a panicked step back before squeezing the trigger on his flamer. Okay, now it's Base's turn. A 12 beats his dex, and he does 10 damage on a 2d6. That O-Beast is roasted. Squeezing the trigger, he drowned the O-Beast in an impressive burst of flame. The feline super omnivore howled and landed on the floor in a heap. Favoring his good leg, Base quickly stomped out the corpse to keep the fire from spreading to anything else before staunching the bleeding on his wounded side. Not particularly pleasant, but at least he wasn't going to bleed out before finding a med kit or a doctor. The extinguished O-Beast lay on the floor in front of him, the smell of cooked meat wafting up and tickling his nose. Base smiled greedily, revealing a mix of canines and molars behind his bucked front teeth. It would be such a shame to let all that cooked meat go to waste. Base rolls a brawn to eat the slain O-Beast. He gets a 9 over 7, so he does eventually get it down. All of it. Several long minutes of gluttonous bliss later, Base waddled on with a considerable bulge in his stomach. His guts groaned happily as they slowly began to break down the O-Beast's carcass crammed inside of him. His mouth crooked into a wry smile. That detour probably took longer than he should have taken, but it was so worth it. Maybe he should see if the ones in the lobby were still edible once he found the Federation expedition. As he continued along, he started to call out to anyone that might hear him in this endless maze of hallways, doors, and rooms. "Hello? Is anyone here?" he shouted. A few seconds later, an armored head peered out of a side door and turned to give him a glare that was felt even through the helmet's opaque visor. Soon the rest of the figure walked through, a human woman clad head to toe in the heavy exoskeleton of the wreck troopers. Her plasma SMG was drawn, and the metallic tentacles of her exo-pack stood inert as the device waited for her mental commands. Base thought one of the Sol Federation's elite Nova Marines was here, given the trail of obese bodies in the atrium. The wreck trooper was definitely a skilled fighter. The female wreck trooper was silent as she watched him, then looked up at something in the ceiling, then back down at him. Base did his best to follow her gaze. If there was another obese, he wanted some warning. The armored human then walked over to him and gingerly prodded his stuffed belly with a single finger. On reflex, Base unleashed a mighty belch as a gas pocket loosened up from his mysterious friend's explorations. "You ate one?" the helmeted woman asked incredulously. "Yep. Obese tastes good with a light sear. Could have used some marina sauce, though. The one down the hall didn't know what hit it," he replied with a smile as he extinguished his flamer. "That was the last one in here," the armored female remarked as she tapped the side of her helmet. Almost instantly, over 24 humans filed out of the room and started heading down towards the elevator that Base had taken up. A lot of the humans were wounded or bandaged. The pacifier was quick to notice. "What's going on?" Base asked. "Those obese have overrun the entire orbital colony. We don't know when or how, but they're almost everywhere. We're going to try and head back to the hangar and board the escape pods now that we have a lull before they attack again. Hopefully the pods will keep us alive until the next Federation patrol arrives," the wreck trooper explained. Base nodded. "Sergeant Base, Pacifier Corps. I'm part of the Commonwealth expedition that will be arriving soon." "Corporal Julia Robertson, Wreck Troopers," the battle mechanic replied in turn. Base thought he recognized the name, but decided to put that tidbit aside for now, especially as a medic in the procession noticed his injury and stopped to apply a proper bandage and some disinfectant. The wound briefly burned, but soon the rabbit was walking like he had never been bitten. Base is now healed back to 10 HP. Base lumbered after the others, switching his flamer for his rifle as the group started to backtrack the way he came. Elevator, atrium, monorail terminal, nothing happened. Yet as the missing expedition boarded the train back to the hangars, the creatures appeared and started attacking the station. Yet the train was already racing away as the obese roared in frustration. Arriving at the hangar an hour later, the group fanned through the abandoned checkpoint and into the hangar. The Federation explorers all loaded up into the escape pods and launched, leaving only Base and Robertson in the hangar. The wreck trooper looked at the small one-person ship that Base arrived in and sighed. "I'm not leaving this colony without getting smothered, aren't I?" she asked with a defeated shake of her head. "Oh, don't act like you won't need a hug when this is over," Base teased, yet his ears were listening for the sound of obese catching up with them. This stopped Julia. The pacifier was fairly certain that the armored human was blushing beneath her helmet. Base considered replying, but the distant yowls of hunting obese were making his long ears twitch. "How about we talk about this later?" he asked as he opened up his ship and helped her get into the pilot's seat after squeezing in behind her. Squeezed in and with his passenger wrapped in a tight hug, Base buttoned up the ship and took off. As his ship began to taxi out of the hangar, he attempted to contact the Commonwealth expedition again. "Expedition Command, this is Bulwark 1. Do not attempt to dock with the orbital colony. I repeat, do not dock," The colony is overrun with O-beasts, and the Sol Federation team has evacuated by escape pods. Okay. Does the expedition flotilla hear him, or is it too late to stop them from docking with the colony? I give it a 50-50, and 40 says he narrowly makes it. Message received, Bulwark 1. Understood. We will pick up the Federation escape pods and figure out what to do next. We'll probably request additional expedition support. Expedition Command out. Come home, Bulwark 1. Free of the colony and the expedition warned of the danger, Base leaned back as Julia shuddered and fell asleep in his arms as the adrenaline finally left her body. End of story.